You're listening to The Roots, a podcast from Minnesota AMA District 23 ARMCA. I'm your host, Jackie Reese. Let's dive deeper into what makes our district so great. This podcast was prepared by an independent contractor and may not be the views of the Board of Directors of District 23 ARMCA or any of their sponsors or affiliates. Welcome everybody to episode 31 of The Roots, a special Memorial Day episode of our podcast here at District 23 ARMCA. And so first of all, I'd like to thank all the people that served in our military that paid the ultimate sacrifice for our country and our freedoms. And hey, before we get this podcast started, a special thank you to the sponsors that support District 23 ARMCA and make this podcast possible, Fly Racing and Spring Creek MX Park. Now tune in for an episode with Tommy Keech, USMC vet of 24 years. Welcome everybody to episode 31 of The Roots, joined by Tommy Keech this week. Tommy, how are you?
Good. How are you guys? Or how are you doing, Jackie?
I'm good, thanks. So this is a Memorial Day episode of The Roots, our second here since we started going, which we will get into in a little bit. But first, I want to give a little background on you. How did you get into motorcycling?
I grew up, I guess my dad was always really into motorcycles, and I just grew up this huge fascination of, whether it was motorcycles, ATVs, three-wheelers when I was a kid, all that stuff. And my parents were super against it. So of course, it makes you really want to do it worse. And my grandma and grandpa had some old dirt bikes from my uncles that they had, and they let me start riding those, and I did that. And then I just was, I was crazy about motocross in the 80s, and it seemed like something I could never do because I didn't have any support. And I followed it all, and I had posters all in my room, and finally my grandpa let me sell this old Yamaha dirt bike that I had and let me use the money to put towards a motocross bike. And I bought a 1987 CR 125. It was my first dirt bike. That was in 1990. And then I started racing District 23 in 1991 and did that for a few years. And that's kind of how I got into it. I had friends that took me to the races when I was 15. And then when I was 16, I took myself, and I think I had a Ford Escort with a little motorcycle trailer. And I got a new 92 CR 250. So I raced that 125 for 1 year. And then in 92, I got a CR 250, and then just kind of took off from there. And I did it 92, 93 pretty hard, a little bit in 94. And then I was kind of at a crossroads in my life. I graduated high school in 93 and needed to figure out what I was going to do with my life. And I found myself joining the Marine Corps at the end of 1994. And so the motorcycle got sold, or actually, I think I left it at Larson's and they sold it for me at some point. But yeah, that was a YZ 250, then 94 YZ 250, and joined the Marine Corps. And I think my next bike was a 97 YZ 250 that I bought in Oceanside, California. And then I realized I could order bikes from Larson's and he'd ship them to me wherever I was in the country. So that was pretty cool. I talked to Mike Larson, and basically every motorcycle I've ever bought, whether it was a street bike or a dirt bike, he'd send me wherever I lived. And there was just a brief period of time there in 2010 to 2013 where I rode Kawasaki's and he didn't sell them. So then I had to figure that out. And then in 14, I went back to Yamaha's, and I've been getting them from them again ever since. So yeah, obviously there's a lot that happened in between there, but yeah, I just kind of got the bug when I was a kid. And then I found my way in the Marine Corps, which really, I got stationed in Southern California, which is the mecca of motocross. So I was in heaven. I went to all the supercrosses. You can go to like 5 or 6 supercrosses a year when you live there. Mm-hmm. And they're all within an hour where I live. So I did that, and, ride at all the cool tracks that you read about when you were a kid and see on TV. So I did all that. And then my friends were in a desert club. So we'd go to the desert and just ride in the desert. And I thought that was pretty fun, but I didn't have any of the equipment. I didn't really have money to, buy a big tank and hand guards and 18-inch rear wheel, all the stuff you got to do to bulletproof your bike for the desert. So I just rode it as a motocross bike with a big gas tank. And I signed up for my first desert race. I think it was 1998. Yeah, it was 1998. And I didn't know what, I'd just been a B-class motocrosser. It was the highest I ever got, really, and when I was younger. And I asked my friends what class to sign up, and they made me sign up in the pro class in the desert. And I ended up getting third, and then I caught the bug doing that. So I did that every weekend until I just absolutely destroyed my motorcycle and went through a couple of them that season. And I spent every dime I made in the Marines riding my dirt bike on the weekends in the desert. But it was good. It wasn't deployed, so it kept me busy. And like I always tell my friends who have kids now, like, you don't have to worry about your kid drinking or doing drugs if you get them into dirt bikes, because you'll never have enough money to do it.
Right.
So
Yeah.
But no, it was good. I met a lot of people. That's how I met everyone at Pro Circuit, and they still help me out doing a lot of that desert stuff. I got to meet a lot of people in the industry because there's so much more access when you're out in the desert
Hmm.
to, there's a box fan there and you just hang out at it. There's no security. It's not like the fanfare and the crowds that you get at Supercross or an outdoor motocross. I mean, everything's accessible. You talk to all the factory riders. They're all just hanging out in their motorhomes and they're all part of motorcycle clubs and they're just riding in the desert. And then you go throw down for like 3 hours chasing little pink ribbons tied to bushes, and it's pretty neat. But yeah, that was like my first exposure to like riding and racing with people you see on TV. Like living in California, when I'd go there, I'd go to practice on a Wednesday afternoon, and like Ricky Johnson's practicing, or like Sebastian Tortelli would be out there, and Ryan Hughes, and all these guys that were my heroes. So you ride a dirt bike with them, and made it pretty fun. Definitely made it real.
Yeah. Were there any interactions with some of those pro riders that really stood out to you?
Um, Probably Ricky Johnson because he's a really big supporter of the military. Like he still
Mm.
does. Like he teaches some classes for riding for special forces in North Carolina, and so he was always really cool, and he knew I was in the Marines, and we'd show up at a race, and he'd talk to me and stuff, and that was pretty cool. But I do some GFI Fall Series races and stuff there. And, I left and went to North Carolina after I was back here in Minnesota for a while. We can get into like the chronology of where I was all stationed, but
Hmm.
even when I went back 10 years later, I'd still see him at a track, and he would know, like he'd remember. And we had a mutual friend in North Carolina, so that was kind of cool to talk to him about that. But he's one of the superstars of the history of the sport, so that probably sticks out the most. Is just talking to RJ, and I never would have guessed that I'd do that.
Yeah.
Then again,
Yeah.
we're from Minnesota, and we have Dungy and Jeremy Martin here too, so
Hmm.
it's like
And Alex, don't forget
pretty,
Alex.
yeah. And Alex, I mean, we have all these
Yeah.
people that have won all these championships right here in our home state, so it's pretty
Right.
cool. You get people don't think of Minnesota as that, but I mean, it's amazing how much talent comes out of here.
Hmm. Absolutely. I don't want to gloss over. I think, if I remember correctly, one of your first desert races was a national hare and hound. Like,
Yeah,
not
that
not
was my very
not an
first
easy
desert race.
race. Okay, tell
Like
us
I didn't
about
go to a
that.
club race. I went to the desert a couple times with my friends and would do like club rides, but I'd never done a race. And yeah, my very first race was the Lucerne Valley National Hare and Hound. I think it was '98, and yeah, I signed up in the 250 Pro class, and I just took off and chased ribbon. You all start with a dead engine. You race to like one trail. It's big. You can practice the start, but that's it. You can't practice the course. I mean, I think the factory riders go out and practice the course during the week because there's nobody there, but because clubs put them on and they set the courses up, a week in advance or 2 weeks in advance. But yeah, you just show up and you kind of practice the start a little bit in the morning, and then there's 70, 80 people on a starting line, and everyone, or it's probably more than that actually, because they run multiple classes together. But yeah, you just go and it's 2 loops for everybody, and then like A class went another loop, like a third loop. And then I came in the pits the first time. I had no idea what place I was in or what I was doing. I just got gas and I think I ate a banana or had a bite of a banana and changed goggles and took off for the second loop. And I remember I hit a bump and I was riding my front wheel for a long ways, going way too fast, and finally thought I was going to save it. And then it was like the slowest crash ever, slow motion crash. Just finally cartwheeled. And I don't know how far I slid on my back, but my chest protector had my name and number on the back when I started, and it didn't when I got up. So it all got rubbed off. But I had a CamelBak on, and I think that saved me because when I hit the ground, I was completely soaked. Like that thing exploded all over me, but I didn't have any injuries. So I got back up, got back on my bike, and went. And yeah, at the end of the race, I think I was probably like 19th overall. That's when 500s ruled the desert. And I'm on a 250. But yeah, I got third in the 250 Pro class and 19th overall. And all my friends were like, "See, you're in the right class." Like I had no idea. I had no idea how many minutes the winners were ahead, but it was a pretty neat experience. I don't know how it would have ended if I wouldn't have crashed, but I'm just glad I didn't get hurt because I think about crashing going that fast now. I don't even want to imagine it.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
I saw a video recently of one of the top pro guys doing some desert racing. He hit this hole and he was on all fours for a while and not somewhere that you want to be like injured
Yeah,
in the
it's
middle of the
crazy. I
desert.
mean, you're going so fast and they put little down arrows before dangerous sections. But I think everyone's idea of dangerous is a little different.
Hmm.
So what's a dangerous section to one course rider or course maker might not be to someone else. So you come into some sections like, that's kind of hairy for no down markers, but yeah, you just kind of go and go as fast as you're comfortable with, I guess.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it was better being big. Like I'm too big to do like stop and go, like county fair races and stuff. But like the desert was nice because I could kind of just hang off the back of the bike and go and soak everything up with my legs.
Hmm.
But,
Yeah, I have the opposite problem there.
yeah.
So going back to right after you graduated high school, you joined the Marine Corps. Take
Yep.
us through whatever you're comfortable with your military career.
Yeah. So I started out enlisted. I just decided one day I didn't want to work for my family anymore. They had a construction business and I fixed stuff on farms growing up and just didn't want to do that anymore. And my grandma was always in the military. She actually retired from the military the year I graduated or the year I joined the military.
That's
So my
cool.
grandma retired in February of '94 and I joined in December of '94. She was in the Army. She was active duty in the Guards. And that was just her job. Like my grandma came to my house every morning before breakfast and she had camis on and combat boots. And, people make jokes about your grandma in combat boots, but mine actually did. And she's still alive. Like she's great. Like she's very active, like in the American Legion and everything. And she had asked me in 11th grade if I'd ever thought about joining the military. And I didn't send you any of these pictures, but like my high school graduation pictures, I had like a long mullet and my dirt bike. And I was like, absolutely not. Like there'll be no military in my life. And she's like, are you sure? And I was like, yeah. And lo and behold, one day when I was frustrated with working, I showed up and was talking to my mom at the kitchen table about what I should do. And she said, or she didn't really know. We were kind of looking at jobs in the newspaper back then. And there was a postcard from the Marines. And I looked at my mom and I said, I'm just going to join the Marines. And she looked at me, she's like, no, you're not. I'm like, you're crazy. And I still had a mullet. It's hard to believe now because I can't grow hair, but that's my punishment for having a mullet. But yeah, I called the number and the guy on the other end was like, yeah, right. So I'm like, I'm looking for some information to join the Marine Corps. And he's like, yeah, right. And I'm like, oh man, I'm already disqualified. And they're like, oh, you're serious? And I said, yeah. And he's like, oh, sorry, I thought you were one of my recruiter buddies playing a joke on me. So I was like, no, I'm serious. And so he lined it up and I went and took a test. And, the rest is kind of history. As I said, that was October and I was gone in December. I mean, it's not, in hindsight, I don't recommend joining the Marine Corps 2 days after Christmas. Like that's when I shipped for boot camp, which I don't know why anyone want to spend their New Year's at San Diego recruit training, but that's what I did. And when I graduated boot camp in March, I actually graduated boot camp on St. Patrick's Day in '95, and then came home for a couple weeks and went back to my school and ended up doing amphibious assaults when I was enlisted. So that's what I did, and was stationed in Southern California in Oceanside, right there by Carlsbad at Camp Pendleton, and did amphibious assaults for I guess 4 years. I did two deployments in '95, and then in '98. That was when Saddam was kind of threatening chemical warfare on Kuwait. So we went over there for that. And it was actually a pretty eventful deployment. But, we had no idea like what was to come in a few short years. And then I was getting close to the end of my enlistment. You sign up for 4 years. And I really liked being in the Marines, but my friends were kind of starting to graduate college. And I thought maybe that was the direction I should go. And so I had a pretty good boss at the time. He owned a couple airplanes and he'd fly to like my desert races and watch me. And I thought that was pretty neat. And he told me like, you can stay in the Marines. And he goes, there's this program where all you have to do is go to college. If you get selected, you just go to college for 4 years at any college of your choice that you can get accepted to. And you're still on active duty. Your job is just to go to college, get a degree, and then you'll get a commission. And then you got to give back 4 years as an officer. Or if you decide to quit at that point, you still owe 4 more years as an enlisted Marine. Either way, you owe them 4 years if you go to college for 4 years. So I got accepted to that program, and it was kind of funny because I was pretty close with Kurt Caselli and his dad Rich. And Kurt, was obviously a KTM standout rider and passed away in Baja, and then his dad passed away shortly thereafter. And we were sitting around a campfire at the desert race, and you're going to get good support for '99 because you're doing good in the 250 class. And Steve Hengeveld, he's a friend of mine. He's won the Baja 1000 like 13 times. And he was racing factory 250s then for Kawasaki. And he was going to big bikes. He just wanted a big bike. And by that point, he was like basically the only one that would beat me. If he showed up, I was guaranteed second place or worse on a 250. So we were talking about that. And I told the Casellis, I'm like, well, I applied for this college program. And I'm sure since you just told me I'm going to get, all this help for next year racing in the desert, I'll get accepted for it. And I said, I'm probably going to go to Minnesota and go to the University of Minnesota. And literally like 2 months later, I got a phone call from my boss saying, hey, congratulations, you're accepted for MESEP. And I got accepted at the University of Minnesota and moved there in August of '99. and started going to school at the U of M and got a degree there. So I came back and started racing a lot because I was in good shape. So I raced District 23, and I hadn't been here since. I mean, I did a couple of District 23 races, like maybe one in '98 in the summer. Maybe I think I raced Plainview, and I came back in the fall of '99 and hit a few races. And then the summer of 2000 was after my first year of college. I had to go to officer candidate school, which is like boot camp but for officers. So I had to do that for 6 weeks. Basically, I had to go to boot camp again, but kind of already knew what it was about by that point. So I'd been in the Marines for 6 years now, or I guess, yeah, 5.5 years. And I came back and I was like, I think I was 195 pounds. I was 6'5". I'm 250 now. So I can't imagine being 55 pounds lighter right now. But I know I came back and I didn't have any problem with physical fitness that fall, racing motocross, and raced all of the fall of 2000. That was when I turned 25. So it was nice to go to 25 plus. And I rode 250B and 25 plus, or 16 to 24B, and then 25 plus B when August rolled around. And it's funny because today I show up at the races and I'm still racing the same guy as Jed O'Connor. And me and him would battle then in 250B, and it's pretty fun. Like it's just a different scale. You race the same people. Like you think like, oh, I'm gonna get older and it'll be easier, but the people you're racing get older too, so it doesn't get any easier. There's just ridiculously good competition in the vet classes here in Minnesota too. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I did that, and then in the spring of '01, I actually broke my leg at Millville, the same exact way I broke it this last year at Cambridge. So 20 years apart, I did the same thing to each leg, but at least I did it to each of them and not just one twice or something. But mm-hmm. Yeah, so I did that, and then I had, thankfully, I'd already been to officer candidate school, so I had 2 years of college to heal up, and then before I had to go back to the Marine Corps, back to reality. So I didn't ride again until in the fall of '03. I bought a 2004 Honda CRF 450. So like the sport changed while I was injured too. You went from 2 strokes to 4 strokes, and everything kind of changed. But that was good. Then I raced. I got commissioned and went to Virginia. So I went from enlisted officer basically, and then I had to go to another school where in the Marine Corps, every officer, whether you're going to be a lawyer, a pilot, or a ground guy, you all have to be able to lead a rifle platoon in combat. It's a little bit different than the other services. Like they think that every Marine is a rifleman, and every Marine officer is a provisional rifle platoon commander. So 6 months of infantry training, and then I knew I was going to flight school. So I had a flight contract. I took a test in college and got selected for that. And then I started the flight school process. So when I was down in Pensacola for like initial flight training, I could race down there. I had my CRF down there. Then I got stationed in Enid, Oklahoma. So I was probably 40 minutes west of Ponca City. And they had a pretty good motocross scene there. And we raced a lot in Stillwater and like Cooperland. And I don't think it's open anymore, but like Guy Cooper has a 500-acre plot of land down there. They call it the 500. And there was good motocross in Oklahoma. I was there for basically all of '04. Then '05, I was back to Pensacola and raced down there. And then at the summer of '05, I got stationed in California again for 6 months to learn how to fly the helicopter I was going to fly in the Marine Corps. And so I was able to race the GFI Fall Series, and I won a 30-plus title doing that fall. And then it was kind of like I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to race much after that because I was going to the fleet to be a helicopter pilot. And like as a young pilot, you're pretty busy, like learning how to fly and trying to get quals. And my bosses were pretty cool. Like I rode a little bit, but didn't do much racing. Excuse me. And then I had some friends I had met in California, moved to North Carolina. And we ended up being in North Carolina for 7 years. And I did 3 deployments, because obviously in college, 9/11 happened. So the world kind of changed. And then I went back to a Marine Corps that's been in combat ever since. Basically they still are in some form. But my entire enlisted career was basically conflict free, other than maybe a little bit of Somalia and then some stuff that flared up in the Middle East. But my entire officer career was spent at combat, and every deployment was a combat deployment. So you didn't know, like, I don't know how this motocross thing's going to pan out because you're just so busy. Even when you're back home, you're training because Marine Corps aviation is so small that once they start deploying, they just keep deploying you and they rotate the units. You do like a 6 or 7 month deployment, and then you get a year off, which is really like 6 months off, and then 6 months of build up, and then another 6 or 7 month deployment, and that cycle just keeps repeating unless you get a different job. So that was kind of put a damper on motocross, but it worked out pretty well actually. Like I rode a little bit, deployed in '07, came back like in the summer of '07, did quite a bit of riding. Then we deployed again in '08. I was able to ride in there, but I mean, not a lot of like significant racing. I think I tried to qualify for Loretta's one time in I think '07 when we got back, or it was '06, and then I knew I was going to be deployed, so it didn't matter. Like I went to an area qualifier and then realized like that wasn't going to work out. And then came back in '08, and then I was deployed in '08 to the middle of '09. But then I got lucky because I came back and I switched to a different aircraft, and I started flying the MV-22 Osprey. And so I knew we wouldn't be deploying for a couple of years. So then I was like, well, I was in really good shape from being on deployment, and I started racing a bunch. And I went to Loretta's in 2010 and ended up getting sixth overall at Loretta's in 2010. And that was in 30 plus, but then they had a BC class, so I didn't have to race. Like I didn't have to race, former pros like you do now. So it's a little bit better, but still highly competitive. And my regional was at Unadilla, so that was kind of fun to race Unadilla. And I had an area qualifier. I did the southeast and the northeast, so a couple of the area qualifiers were close, but then the regionals were like Alabama and New York. Like Alabama was, I think it was Monster Mountain or one of those, and then New York was Unadilla. So I put a lot of miles on the camper. And my little guys at the time, now they're 22, and he's in the Air Force, and then the other one's 17. He just turned 17 yesterday. They would go up and down the East Coast with me in the camper, and they thought it was pretty fun, but we're never really too into motocross. They wanted to play, and they thought it was fun to go do all that. But looking back, I could probably did a lot of stuff that we did for Dad. It's like it was Dad's career, and Dad's riding dirt bikes, and they were just kind of along for the ride. So with that being said, I don't push my little guys into it too much. So 4 and 5-year-old boys, that if they never ride a dirt bike, that's okay. But yeah, so that all that is because I was in the Marines. I got to go race at all those cool places, which as a kid in Minnesota, I would have never driven to all those races and done all that. It's just too much. But since we were out there and it was available, I figured I'd take advantage of it. And I think I told you, in some correspondence, like the moto community is such patriots that it's easy to get support. There's a lot of people that help you out. I know I broke a radiator at Unadilla in practice, and I went to the Team Green truck, and he didn't have one for my bike. And he said, but I think Jimmy Weinert has one. And so I knocked on Jimmy Weinert's truck, and that was when he sponsored Seth Rarick, who, he's the trainer. He was a trainer down at Alden's Baker's factory last year and worked with Star Yamaha and all that. But they were in the motorhome, and I just knocked on the door, and I'm like, Doug from Team Green says you might have a radiator for a 2012 or a 2010 kicks or 450. And he's like, yeah, you need one? And I'm like, I do. And he goes, okay, I'll bring it over to Doug. And so my bike was over at the Team Green tent. He brought it over, and Doug, the Team Green tech, was talking to him and told Jimmy Weinert that I was a Marine. And he came over, and Jimmy Weinert, he's kind of an outspoken, loud, funny guy, He comes over and he goes, well, you're riding for the Jammer this weekend. He slaps this like jamming with Jimmy Weinert sticker on my front fender, and he goes, you can have that radiator. And they threw the radiator on my bike, and it worked out pretty well. So I ended up qualifying for Loretta's there, because of him and his support. So, yeah, it's just, I feel like the military has given me a ton of opportunities that, I wouldn't have had otherwise. And that's not just in motocross, like in life and, and people you meet and things you do. Like, it's a pretty tough experience to replicate, or I can't imagine my life going any other way. There's a lot of hardship, and it definitely took its toll on my family. And I mean, I have 2 divorces to show for it, but it's a tough life. But I mean, other than, some decisions I made, I don't think I'd change much.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty neat.
Yeah, I mean, I think you kind of touched on it, but I was kind of wondering how, your military career influenced your motorcycling, or your motorcycling influenced your military career, like as a person, deep down, kind of thing.
Yeah, I think, I think I definitely got more competitive once I was in the Marines. Like, I don't think I had the will and the determination maybe that I have now, or especially that I had in the, like the early 2000s when I was like younger and more physically fit, less injured. But yeah, it definitely played a part in, I'd say, like my success. Like I don't know that. I mean, on 125, I never even got a trophy. So, I mean, it definitely got better, but I think everyone goes through that. Like the learning curve of motocross is steep for a lot of people in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think the military was a cool part of that. And even like at Loretta Lynn's, like Davey Coombs and them and Team Green, they did in 2010 they did interviews, with the military people that were there. And there's not a lot, and I don't think they'll ever have a warrior class at Loretta's just because, to have like to fill gates at a area qualifier and then all the regionals, and then also at Loretta's, like there may be enough people in the country that are military only to fill the gate, but to be competitive at that level, I just don't think they have the numbers.
Mm-hmm.
But if they could add like fire and police and first responders, maybe, but then where do you draw the line? I don't know. But the year I went, it was kind of funny because Pro Circuit was helping out both me and this guy named Stacy Virgin, and he's a Navy SEAL, and he absolutely dominated the first two motos in 30 BC, and then so they were kind of giving us crap like, well, it looks like the Navy's going to win this war or this battle, and he won the first two motos, and I was like floundering around in sixth, and uh, and then that poor guy like got in a pile up in the third moto and DNF'd, so he went like 1-1 DNF for I don't know 20th place or something, because they had a crazy number of points to your total if you DNF or DNS, and so he didn't win the overall, but he definitely had the class covered that year. And so when we were getting our awards, I gave a little shout out to him because he's in an ER. He was in the ER getting his dislocated or separated shoulder fixed, and we're there celebrating a good week of racing that he had pretty much dominated up until that point. So it was ironic that it was a military member in that class. I think we were probably the only two, and he ended up getting hurt. So
You had
yeah.
mentioned that you broke your leg while you were in college, but when you were active, were you ever nervous about getting hurt and jeopardizing that aspect of your life?
Well, it was when I became a pilot because I mean, the nice part is when you're on active duty, like if you're hurt, people are hurt all the time in the military. Like you get paid, you just don't really advance in your career or job, and if you have the wrong boss, they can, I guess technically they can like ring you up on charges, like you're damaging government property, they call it.
Hmm.
Because apparently, if you get sunburned bad enough and can't go to work, they can actually charge you with destruction of government property, which I always thought was kind of interesting.
Yeah.
But I always had really cool bosses, and if I had a boss that didn't like it, I kind of just backed off and didn't ride. Like I went through that a little bit when I was in Arizona in like 2012 to 2016. My bosses were not fans. Like they're like, you can't do high risk activities, which I thought was funny because we flew airplanes and shot live ordnance and did that all the time. But motocross and football and stuff was high risk activities. But I guess they have, finite number of resources. We're instructors at the aviation weapons school, and if you lose an instructor, it's kind of hard to just replace them. So that point, like there was some of that. Like, yeah, you had to be careful. I had one boss when I was younger. He asked me if I got hurt, if I come in limping or something. He's like, you got hurt in that dirt bike, didn't you? And he'd come up with a different story. Like, no, I think I was running and got hurt training for the physical fitness test. But yeah, it just depended on who you worked for. But yeah, there was definitely some people that were more for it than others.
Mhm.
But like when I went to Loretta's in 2010, my boss actually let me take. I didn't even get charged leave. They let me go because it was like temporary assigned duty for like a competitive activity.
Mm.
And so since you were doing something that you could theoretically like represent the Marine Corps or something,
Mm.
I didn't even get charged leave. So that was kind of cool. I spent 8 days in Tennessee and didn't have to take it out of my 30 days a year that you get to take off.
Nice.
So yeah, he was pretty supportive. They said they all had the live feed up in the office and they were listening to see how it went because it wasn't televised then.
Hmm.
But yeah, so they thought that was pretty neat.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's cool
Yeah.
that, even outside of the motorcycling community, people are still supportive of, the things that people do in the motorcycling community.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's cool.
Yeah.
And it's weird how you run into some people that like you meet them and you're always looking for like a sticker on their vehicle or something like,
Hmm.
oh, you're in the motocross. Like there's always subtle hints. So
Yeah.
there was an Air Force instructor that flew Ospreys when I first started flying them, and he was like, "Do you want to swap seats?" And I'm like, "Why?" And he goes, "Well, I can't really lift this arm up because I hurt my shoulder riding my dirt bike." And I'm like, well, "That's funny because I hurt this shoulder riding my dirt bike, and if we swap seats, it'll be perfect. Then we can both reach up and touch the middle of the plane." So we switched seats, and then we were able to do everything with our motocross disabilities.
That's wild.
It's kind of funny, yeah.
So I think on your pattern here of where you were all stationed, I think we left off in Florida. At some point you get to Hawaii and eventually you make your way back to Minnesota. So tell us about the rest of that.
Yeah, so like I said, I was in North Carolina for 7 years, and then I switched aircraft. That's when I started flying the Osprey. Um, and then I went to the weapons school. So I got into the Osprey kind of early, and I got to do quite a few firsts in the Osprey. Um, it's some cool stuff you can Google if you just add USMC to my name. There's some light reading. But so I did the Osprey, and then I was selected to become an instructor. So it's like ironic that the new Top Gun movie's out, because it's kind of like that, where you're there as a student, and they treat you terribly, and then they're like, well, if you do good enough, you can come back as an instructor someday. And like we kind of like Top Gun quotes are pretty prevalent there. And yeah, so I got selected to be an instructor in Yuma. So I went up to the weapons school there. And you don't have aircraft, but you teach the class twice a year to like the best aviators in the fleet, and everything's live fire. I mean, you have an actual infantry battalion that supports it, and you do live fire raids. You do it's real bombs, real rockets, real bullets, and you just teach them to employ the aircraft that they're trained to employ, and teach them how to do it. It's a pretty high level. Short of actual combat, it's probably the best training they'll ever get. And so I did that from 12 to 16. And then in 2016, I moved to Hawaii, and a friend asked me to. He was slated to be the commanding officer of the first Osprey Squadron in Hawaii, and he asked if I'd come be the executive officer, which is basically second in command of the squadron. And I said, sure. I'll move to Hawaii, and did that. And I did take a dirt bike with, and also took a supermoto bike with. I had a Husky 701 that, in my mind, I was going to commute on it, so I rode that. But yeah, we got to Hawaii and basically had to start an Osprey Squadron from scratch, and like trying to find training areas on different islands. And I didn't realize it was the most isolated island chain in the entire world. Like the closest piece of land is like 2,000 some miles away. And so you really are like, island fever is real. You're stuck literally in the middle of nowhere. But yeah, I ended up in Hawaii, and pretty fun place. I still think it's probably more fun to visit than live. But I can't imagine how expensive stuff is right now there, because it was expensive then.
Yeah.
And I didn't end up being the executive officer at first, because another guy came that was senior to me. So I was the operations officer. And basically, I just ran the squadron. I did all the flight scheduling and all the training, and just locked down all that for everyone. We had 24 pilots. It was the first time I'd ever been in a squadron where we could basically make two complete female crews. So we had 4 female pilots, and we had female air crewmen in the back. So it was really cool as far as that goes. It was neat how I don't know how I went. Like my first job in the Marine Corps was no females, like complete male MOS only, and that all changed. I was in for 24 years, so it's obviously a long time, but like to see the transformation that happened was it was pretty interesting. And then to end it on a squadron that there was a lot of diversity, and I thought that was super cool. Like I thought 2 of the female pilots we had were like the 2 best pilots in the squadron. Nice. And it was fun to just to train with them and learn with them, and be able to try and influence their careers, because really I never really had that opportunity throughout my career, being in combat arms MOSs. You're kind of just with a bunch of dudes all the time. So a lot of that changed, and for the better. And I still hear from 2 of them now. They're airline pilots, and they like call for references and stuff when they got out. And so yeah, I was in Hawaii for 2 years, and then I decided that. So my older boys were in Arizona still, and then my younger boys were both born in Hawaii. And I just got to a point where I thought, like, I got these 2 kids in Arizona and these 2 little guys with me, and if I stay, I'm going to go to the Pentagon, or I'm going to go back to a squadron and get deployed. And I just kind of saw the writing on the wall. So I thought maybe it was time to go do something outside the Marine Corps. And so I retired in the summer of 2018. And I thought if I came back to Minnesota, I'd be by family. Like my family's here. And my wife at the time didn't really have, she just has her mom and her sister. Her father had passed away. And she decided there's more family here. Like we came here and the kids could grow up with, middle America with aunts and uncles and all that. So we came back here and bought a place in Farmington, because I'd already gotten hired to fly a private jet for a Minneapolis billionaire out of Minneapolis St. Paul Airport, the big airport. So I kind of just walked out of the Marine Corps and walked right into that job. Nice. And did that for a couple of years, I guess, till end of May 2020, when COVID hit. He stopped flying, but yeah, I moved back here and started trying to figure out life outside of the Marine Corps, and I didn't race motocross at first. I had my bike, but didn't do much riding the first year. And then the fall of 2019, I started riding again. think I went to Mankato. I think I broke 9 ribs that day. It was a kind of an ugly crash, but it was fun. I came back and started riding. Then the following spring, COVID hit that spring, so motocross was a little bit delayed that summer.
Mhm.
But I started racing. I think I went to pretty much all the Millvilles that summer and did some practices at other places, and that was fun. It kind of gave me the bug again, and I got back into it. And it took me till I was 45 years old to move to A class in motocross, but I did in the summer of 2020. And then last summer I raced quite a bit up until I broke my leg in July. So yeah, that kind of got me from out of the Marine Corps back to Minnesota. And then when COVID hit, I decided to open my own business. So I just fix. So I got TK and Sons Repair. I fix small engines, a lot of lawnmowers, snowblowers, chainsaws, all that kind of stuff. And then I do a lot of ATVs. And if people want their dirt bikes worked on, I'm happy to work on dirt bikes because that's my favorite thing to work on. And then a lot of snowmobiles. So thought one day, so I helped a buddy at a boat shop when COVID hit because we weren't flying and I was still employed, but I was just going crazy sitting around my house. So I started helping him fix boats, and then I started fixing small engines. And I figured out after like 6 months of that it was literally the first time in my entire adult life that I've been in charge of my weekends and holidays, and that was pretty eye opening. So I decided that for the near term, I don't think I want a boss, and I don't think I'll go back to flying anytime soon. Maybe when my kids are a little older, but I keep thinking like maybe next week the phone won't ring and it'll be dead and I'll have to get a real job. But phone keeps ringing and I keep having stuff to fix, so I keep doing it. But yeah, that's kind of how we got to where we are right now.
Mm-hmm.
Still trying to figure out a way to ride my dirt bike again after breaking my leg.
Yeah.
So I went to Mora last week and it was better. It was better than Sandy Corners that day, but
Good.
there's just a long ways to go. So I'm trying not to get too down on myself about it. Just baby steps and have fun. And you go riding with your buddies that you're competitive with last year, and now you're not even close. So
Yeah.
it's there's some work to do there.
Yeah.
But
Well, it's not quite the same as when you broke that other leg 20 years ago, right?
yeah, I know you heal a little quicker then. Like I remember
Yeah.
that I was up and running again pretty quick after that one, and this one's like, and I thought that was my bad leg,
Mm-hmm.
up until I broke my left one this last summer. I thought I was gonna have my right knee replaced maybe this winter, and now that knee is just fine. My left one's the ugly one.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's all perspective, I guess. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's fun. I mean, I talked to my buddies, that have been racing the last few weekends. It hasn't been a great spring for Minnesota motocross. It's
Yeah.
been cold and muddy, and hopefully we can get that turned around and get some nice weekends.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I bought a Goldwing last fall, like a Goldwing bagger from Larson's. I crushed into Larson's on my crutches, and I left on a motorcycle because it's an automatic. And I just had I think it was September, maybe late September, and I was just going so crazy, not being able to ride anything. And so I bought a new Honda street bike with an automatic, and I rode it out of there. And my buddy Scott took my truck and my crutches to his place, and I rode my motorcycle out of there. And I think I put 1,500 miles on it last fall, just trying to get out and do something to not go crazy, sitting in the house with a broken leg. So, but it's good. It's better now. Like every week, it's a ton better than it was the week before. So progress is happening. It's just I don't want to go and screw it up too fast either. So I'm taking my time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But,
Yeah. So now that you've landed back here in Minnesota, you've become a part of the VeteranMX Minnesota chapter. Tell us
yeah.
about the organization and your role in it.
Yeah, so I don't know that I necessarily have an official role. I think I'm the unofficial ringleader of the Millville National, because I know I just got the stuff for that the last couple of days. And we have a good group. There's a good group of veterans. Bruce and Steve Sutton, and Angela's amazing. She's not even a veteran, and she's just so supportive of all that. And I mean, she's like the first lady of the VeteranMX Minnesota scene for sure. So actually, she's the president, and everyone else is just trying to figure it out. But she does a great job with all that, and really makes it easy for us because she kind of leaves all the groundwork. But yeah, I reach out to like Pete Lindquist and Mark Code. They're like on the West Coast and kind of run all the stuff with the races, and they're super supportive. The whole premise is, it's throttle therapy for veterans or like-minded individuals doing something where they can leave some of the trauma and stress behind of things they've done and seen in their life. It's been I had a really good friend that passed away, and we rode a lot together in North Carolina. He was Air Force TACP, and he died riding his street bike one morning at 3 a.m. He just clipped the mailbox and passed away riding his street bike. So I mean, they say that we lose more service members to training accidents in peacetime than we do in combat, which is super tragic. But I mean, it's the reality of things. Like, they're type A personalities that do high risk activities that don't always go well. But yeah, so his name was Brandon. He passed away. And when I think about VeteranMX, they had a warrior class. This was before like I knew what VeteranMX was. In Hawaii, they had a warrior class. And Hawaiians are like, they're into like warrior stuff anyway. So like, but there it happened to be for military people, because there's a lot of military presence on Hawaii, especially on Oahu. And there's one motocross track. So they had a military class and they called it warrior class. And then that caught on with VeteranMX and they kind of called it the warrior class all over. But yeah, that was pretty neat. And I met a guy there that I raced with, and I still see him throughout the country, and we keep in touch through VeteranMX on Facebook. And that whole VeteranMX community is just blown up. Like on Facebook, you can reach out to those guys, and there's people that even through Minnesota, like I met Kerry Anstein on the website, and he's at District 23 races all the time. So there's a lot of people that are not that far away that you can connect with and reach out to, and we all kind of share a common bond, whether you don't have to be in the same branch of service, just the fact that you serve your country. And I think we all know people that serve their country, but in the grand scheme of things, it's like 1% of the nation serves their country. It's not very many people. It's a lot of people, but percentage wise, it's not a lot. Yeah. So small community, but a pretty cool community, and it's nice that it's growing. And there have been quite a few cases where people have like reached out to VeteranMX and asked what it was all about, and then they got involved, and they talk about how it changed their life or kept them from going on a dark path. And when you hear about 22 veterans killing themselves a day, if you can ride a dirt bike with somebody and save one guy in 5 years, that's better than nothing. So yeah, it's pretty awesome. Yeah, absolutely. But that's really the whole purpose behind VeteranMX, is just give those guys an outlet. Some of them have had a pretty rough go, and they still want to do aggressive things and they want to do fun stuff, but they got to figure out a way to do it safe, and maybe not involve alcohol and cars and guns. Go ride your dirt bike in a sober, safe environment, as safe as you can make a motocross track. But yeah. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, it's awesome that
yeah.
It's awesome you're a part of that, and someone with your experience, maybe connecting better with younger people also, and making those connections. I think in any aspect of life of difficulty or trying to conquer new things is important.
Yeah, definitely. And it's cool to be able to lend a hand to someone. Like, it's intimidating, when you pull into a motocross track and it's full of motorhomes and trailers and bikes everywhere. Like, for someone that's never seen that or done that, they already think they're in over their head, and little they know, like, they're going to split you up by skill and stuff like that. So just to have someone walk you through all that and help you get through those first couple, like stressful days or moments or whatever, is probably a pretty big deal to people that, and it's stuff we take for granted. We've been doing it, our whole adult lives. So
yeah.
But, yeah, that part's great. And like I said, everyone's super supportive, at the races with the veteran piece. I know this weekend is or it was last weekend, the Morrow, or the Morrow one was last weekend. He did a memorial thing at Morrow last weekend, and then this weekend I'm sure Millville will do something, and Echo Valley. So it'll be great. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's no shortage of patriots at the motocross races. That's for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So this is the Memorial Day episode, and you are a veteran, I'd like to know what Memorial Day means to you.
So Memorial Day to me is, it's when we think of Memorial Day, everyone's grilling, and there are hot dogs and steaks and burgers, and they're really the most expensive hot dogs, burgers, and steaks you'll ever have, because someone wrote a check for an amount up to and including their life to this country, and Uncle Sam cashed it. They gave their lives for this country, and that's why we have that holiday. And so, like, for me, it means recognizing the people that have gone before us. So I was looking up some stats, and I've talked about this before, like when I've talked in Veterans Day or Memorial Day, about the people that serve. And like I said, it was about 1%. And then you ask people, like, if you ask a high school class right now, like, how many of you have brothers and sisters or cousins that serve, you'll get one or two hands. And then if you say, how many of you have parents or aunts and uncles that served, the amount goes up a little bit. And then if you say, how about your grandparents and great aunts and uncles, then it's like half the classroom, raises their hand. And a lot of those people, like, my grandfather served in World War II, and my grandmother was in during Korea. excuse me. And it's just a staggering number of people have died for this country. It's like total um, worldwide, like just in World War II, we lost 405,000 plus Americans. In the Civil War, which granted was the U.S. fighting the U.S., but 655,000 people died, and it was at the time it was like 2.1% of the population
Wow.
gave their life for their country, fighting for their country. And like Vietnam, we lost 58,000 people, and that was only 0.03% of the population. If we lost the number of people in this country that lost in the Civil War, that happened now, that'd be like losing every service member twice in the entire military, which is crazy. It's a staggering amount of people, but it does say that it shows how small our military is versus our population. But yeah, for me, I mean, at the end of the day, like Memorial Day is just remembering those people that gave their life for our country, and we have the things we have, and we can do the things we do because of that. So, different than thanking a service member, it's more you're thinking about people that made the ultimate sacrifice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and like you had mentioned to me, there are families that, still live with that every day.
Yeah, absolutely. My close friend and neighbor in North Carolina, he died when we were on deployment in Afghanistan in 2011. He actually fell at the back of our airplane. They were getting shot at, and the Pelican case slid back, and he was manning the gun and didn't put his gunner's belt on because he wanted to man the gun to try and protect the aircraft. And the case slid back and pushed him out from 200 feet, and he fell to his death. And it was what I think it was 7 days before we were going back to the United States. So, it was almost over, and he just didn't quite make it out of there. So that's what's hard, and it hits close to home because then you have a funeral, and it's your friend and neighbor, and your kids play with their kids, and
Yeah.
it's there's always someone. Like the thing about the military is, you have a lot of good times, but you meet so many people, and there's just so many funerals. Like it's crazy how many people have passed away that I've known since I've started serving, and 24 years is a long time. You meet a lot of people, and a lot of people die in 24 years in the civilian world too, but in the military world, like marine aviation is a small community. So if an airplane crashes or has a mishap, odds are you probably know the pilots, and that gets hard. And the longer you do it, the more people you know, and it doesn't get any easier, when people give their lives for their country. But I know just yesterday I was noticing a friend of mine that passed away. He was my roommate. He passed away in a helicopter crash, and his youngest son just graduated high school, and he hasn't had his dad since 2012. So I mean, that stuff's it's hard to read and see that stuff, and you think about how when you're having a bad day, it's not really that bad.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Well, Tommy, thank you for joining me. Thank you
You
for
bet.
sharing your perspective and your life with us.
Yeah. Thanks for letting me ramble on for so long.
Absolutely. Thank you, everybody else, for joining us, and thank you to the sponsors that help make this podcast and District 23 ARMCA possible. Fly Racing, Spring Creek MX Park, BCMX Adventure Park, and Vase Cycle. We'll see you in 2 Mondays. Thanks for joining us. Catch us every other Monday wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on our YouTube page.